Thank you for joining us this morning. We are looking at sugar shake and sticky boards today to help stop the incursion of the varroa mite here in Australia. So many of you in other continents will be very familiar with these techniques. Here in Australia we aren't, because we haven't actually had varroa mite spreading here before. There has been a couple of times that it's come onto port and we've managed to kick it out, but here we are with over 60 now detections of it. It's all within the same zones that they're tracing, so fingers crossed we can still get on top of it. One thing you can do to help is do what's called a sugar shake, which is basically putting some icing sugar onto a cup full of bees and shaking them around a bit, and then having a look at that icing sugar and seeing if any mites fall off. And we'll go into detail and show you how you can easily do that, and how you can also easily make yourself a sugar shake kit. So I'm going to blow some smoke into the entrance of this hive just to add a little calming effect. Now the bees are a bit slow this time of year because it's mid-winter here for us, and we're going to pop the box off, and what we want to do is collect a cupful of bees from one of the brood frames. So here goes. Make sure you put your bee bails on. My father Stuart's joining us today.
Hi everyone, about time I got back into this.
And I'm just going to go through the process of the sugar shake. Make sure you fasten your bee suits up, remembering to do up your velcros and all.
You get reminded pretty quickly if you forget with a cranky hive.
Okay, just hang on, this microphone's playing up.
One will be crackling away, sorry.
Okay, good. So we're just going to pry each corner here. It's a good idea to wait as we did then, once you've added the smoke, for the bees to come. And we're just going to get the hive tool and get it, in this case I'll have a go at under the excluder, and we're just loosening up each corner like that. Now we did get into this hive a couple of weeks ago, and since then also Pete's done a sugar shake in all of these hives, so shouldn't be too hard.
Take the back cover off so it gives you a handle.
It's a good handle there. And if you have a look here, we have got some honey coming in, so this will be starting to get heavy. You can see the honey in the window.
Yeah, it is.
All right, coming up. Okay, the frames are coming up with it. So we just need your other hive tool there. Beautiful. And just need to pry off the frames off the excluder, which happens sometimes, especially if you've got a lot of wax up there. Okay. Now the bees are a little bit cranky still,
excluder.
so we might just add a bit more smoke as we go. The excluder's coming with it. For whatever reason, these bees are a bit cranky this morning. They're usually fairly calm, this one, but bees will be bees and change sometimes. Okay, so
a decent amount of honey in it.
if your back's a little tighter, you can grab a hand. We're just going to be lifting off this box like that, and we're going to be upending it here. I'm putting it on its end so we don't squash any bees there. Now look at this. We actually put in a couple of frames, or rather we were doing our spring management 2 weeks ago on this frame here and on this frame here, I believe. So we actually chopped out a bunch of wax, so that'll be interesting to have a look at how they've gone drawing that new comb in 2 weeks.
We'll look at this one.
Let's start with one that's a bit easy to get out, so we'll start with this one. There we go. So we're just pulling that frame out to make ourselves space to get to one of the frames. It's best to get a frame with a nice bunch of nurse bees on it for the process of the sugar shake. What we're looking for is a cup full of bees, and what we're going to do is shake the bees off the frame onto a piece of paper. Then we're going to put those bees into a jar.
One of these shake it off, or?
No, you just put them aside, just lean them up against the hive. We didn't put our shelf on this morning.
Right.
So while you're doing that, I'm going to just get a sugar shake jar prepared. If you could come over here, Carol. And we will put the sugar in the jar. So what we want is a really good size scoop of sugar in the jar like that. And that's icing sugar. Nice fine icing sugar. And then you need to make yourself a lid like this, or you can purchase lids like this already made with a jar. It's got a mesh with about 3 millimeters diameter mesh. And once the bees are in there, we'll be putting the lid on like that. So step one is collect some bees, and we'll do that simply by shaking some bees. If you want to pull out a frame for us.
This one?
And it's also important that, I mean, it's best if we don't include the queen in the sugar shake.
Pretty good idea.
That might upset her. So we're having a good look for the queen first. And we're going to put our piece of paper to shake the bees onto there. The reason why I'm putting it directly on the hive is as we shake, any bees that spill over will just go back into the hive. And I'm putting the icing sugar in the jar first because it seems to hold the bees in there longer. So that's a nice little tip. This jar is a little bit undersized, but I wanted to do a nice clear one so you could see what was going on, and this lid happened to fit this jar. Okay, so we haven't got the queen on there.
You never know, she's going to be sneaky, but I can't see her. Anyone else see her?
Okay, let's shake them on to here. Nice good shake. And what we're trying to do is now put them straight into the jar before they fly away like that. And what you're after is a cup full of bees, just like that. Our lid goes on. And then we are rolling the bees around like this in the icing sugar. They turn into what gets called ghost bees. So they turn all white. It's a bit annoying for the bees, but it doesn't kill them like the alcohol wash does. So they all are getting covered in icing sugar. You want to do this for a bit over a minute.
So you might have had a quick look at the brood while we were doing that shaking, and it's a nice pattern of laying just there. You could expect it to be smaller during the winter, what it is for us, and but it's close with the occasional holes which are for the heater bees to warm the brood in the winter. And the same on the other side. You can see an old queen or a queen cell here, or potentially forming one, but nothing happening there. And so, and in terms of other diseases, you're looking for any holes or pinprick holes in any of the brood capping. And sometimes it's just a new bee emerging, but it can indicate American foul brood or European foul brood. Quite a lot of pollen paddies around the edge there, some in the middle. Yeah, plenty of room for these to expand in the springtime.
So we're just about there with our coating the bees, and you can see there they're all looking nice and white, which is what we're trying to do. The sugar on them stimulates the bees to really groom themselves, but also heats them up, and that helps the mites drop off. Now what would be really interesting Stu, if you pull out this frame, this is one of the ones we put in last week, I believe. Let's have a look. No, that doesn't look like it. We 2 weeks ago we stripped out some of the comb to do our spring management, and I'm wondering which frame that is. Try this one. Lift that one up. We did 2 of them, and there you have it. It's not it's not obvious. They've already been into it. They've already got brood happening.
Yeah.
And here we have. It's time now to do our sugar shake. So if you just follow me over this way. I've set up a piece of white paper. Now there's 2 methods from here. One is you shake the icing sugar onto the white paper and you look very closely for any varroa mites. Now you might need a magnifying glass if your eyes need a little help seeing. And another method is on top of the water. So a white bucket's actually a little bit better than this because you've got a white surface under the varroa mites, which are a little bit red. So here we go. We're now shaking. You can see the icing sugar coming through. Now, hopefully we don't ever see mites in this area, but you never know. And so it's a real help at the moment, especially if you're near one of the red zones where they've detected varroa mite, to do your sugar shake and have a look for mites. You never know, you might be the one to really help the situation and stop the varroa mites spreading further in the country. And onto water is the other option here you can do, and the mites will then float on top. So they seem to be the 2 methods people are using, but if you're experienced with this and you want to add any tips, by all means let us know what you do and what works for you. But that's the basic sugar shake. Now I've got one little bit of something that's come through, but it's not a mite, but you're basically looking out for the varroa mites, a little pinhead sized mite and brownish in red colour. Have a look what they look like online because we don't have a live example for you here, and that way you can really have a tune in and we'll find them when you're doing your sugar shake test. So we're going to put these poor bees that have been rolled around in icing sugar back into the hive now. So if you come back, I'll show you what that looks like. And this is what they call ghost bees, because have a look at this. Just shake them on and away they go, like little ghosts back into the hive. So we could have shaken a little bit longer there. We've been sugar shaking all of these hives and we haven't found any mites, which is great, but we'll keep checking. And just a reminder, if you are near one of those red zones, if you can get in there and do your sugar shake, that will really help the situation. If you've got any questions?
Anywhere in New South Wales really, and if you're near the New South Wales border, Queensland, Victoria, I would do the same, because of course bees don't go to the border.
So, fingers crossed there. The next thing we're going to show you is what's called a sticky board. Now, sticky board is something you don't actually have to pull the hive apart, and it gets used to monitor varroa mite in other continents where they have lots of varroa mites, just by the use of the screen bottom board. So if you've got a flow hive, you'll have a screen bottom board. If you've got a another type of screen bottom board, you can also use this method. And what it basically is you put some sticky substance on a manila folder or a piece of core flute or something like that, and you put it under the screen bottom board, and mites will actually fall through. And that can be a useful way to detect whether there is mites in a hive. More than 10, in the US I've heard that more than 10 means you should then treat. If it's less than 10, generally people will not treat and they'll let that hive go on. Now in our case we're just looking for the presence of, so the idea is you put your sticky board in, you wait 24 hours and then you examine it for any mites. So we'll make one of those now and I'll show you how to do that. So what we're going to do is we will Don't need that icing sugar anymore. Now I've got a piece of core flute that will fit nicely in the tray here. So if I pull out this tray, I've cut this to size to go right in there, and then the mites will drop through the screen bottom board. All we need to do now is make this a nice sticky surface. So there's multiple things you can use for that. Some people use a mixture of vegetable oil and beeswax and they cook it up. Some people use Vaseline, some people use even engine oil. In this case, I'm going to use old cooking oil that's been sitting around long enough to get almost the consistency of honey. And I had that around because I collect old fish and chip oil from the chip shop to run my car on, but when it sits around long enough, exposed to the air, it ends up very sticky like honey. So that's what I'm going to use. But as said, there's lots of different things you can use. If you're experienced with making sticky boards, please chime in and let us know what you do. All I'm going to do is paint the sticky stuff on here. Kofa is a common one, it also gets called vegetable shortening. Basically you want something that's just a bit thicker than vegetable oil in order to stay nice and sticky on your sticky board. This is very sticky today. So it'll take a sec just to paint this nicely across.
Want me to pour some on?
Oh, we've got enough there. And we're just painting it on as best you can. And that'll make a nice trap for those varroa. Are there any questions coming in, Chase?
Yeah, so everyone really, this is fantastic. A lot of people tuning in, especially here in New South Wales and in the USA. Nellie and Jack are just wondering, what's the ideal temperature to do a sugar shake test?
So it's the same as general brood inspections. So mid-morning to mid-afternoon on a nice warm sunny day is your perfect time for doing your brood inspections. So that's also the case for doing your sugar shake. Bees will be a little bit calmer theoretically, although they're a little bit upset this morning for an unknown reason. And that way should get happier bees. So there we've got our sticky board. It's ready to go. And all we're going to do is place it underneath the hive. Now if you've got our classic, you'll already have a piece of core flute and all you need to do is clean it or turn it up the other way. Put your sticky material on. Do not use honey, as honey will then attract the bees to this area. Okay. We're now putting that in. 24 hours later, come back and inspect that for any sign of varroa mites. And that's it. Any more questions?
Great. Danny's saying that she mainly tests the nurse bees mainly when doing the varroa mite as well. So.
Well, that's what we were doing. We were shaking from the brood.
Yep.
And so we took the bees from the centre of the brood, hoping there were more nurse bees there.
Fantastic.
But I didn't ask them. Or give them any sort of an interview. You know, some of those bees, I'll just say, yeah, I'm a nurse bee, when really
They're the ones with the little
duty.
caps on and the little red crosses.
That's
They're the ones, Stu. But hard to tell when they're covered in icing sugar. Roz is wondering, how often should they do a sugar shake in the red zone?
If you're in the red zone, you'll have to follow what the DPI suggests. That's the lockdown zone. If you're around the red zone nearby, then you should do it as often as you're willing. Everything helps at the moment, especially in this next 2 weeks. We've got a window of opportunity here before bees swarm. Now once bees are swarming, any hive with varroa could take off into the forest, into a tree hollow or whatever, and it's going to be a lot harder to get on top of. So this next 2 weeks is critical. There's a whole big team of people, beekeepers, fire brigade, and all down there going through the process of sugar shaking. Now I should also talk about alcohol wash. Now alcohol wash is more reliable than a sugar shake, so if you're in that zone, I would actually encourage you to do the alcohol wash. So it's similar But the sad bit is that those bees you put in the jar will die, because instead of putting icing sugar on them, you're putting alcohol or methylated spirits on them. And when you switch it around and turn the jar up the other way, the alcohol and mites will go through, and instead of pouring it into water, you just pour it into another jar. So you can see all of this online, how to do a alcohol wash, and the DPI's put videos out, and we've shared those videos as well. We can put some of those in the links below. But an alcohol wash is more reliable than the sugar shake, and if you are really close, then I would encourage you to help out by doing the alcohol wash or the sugar shake.
Yeah, a few people commenting on that actually said on the alcohol wash, and Peter Cox, who's one of our ambassadors in South Australia, is saying they've been asked to do alcohol washes and send the bees in for testing if they've purchased queens from breeders in New South Wales. But he thinks it's mainly a precaution at the moment.
Yep.
So yeah, a few people were asking exactly about the alcohol wash, so thanks for mentioning that. Janet was just asking what was in the bottom of the tray before you put the core flute down. I think it was just empty, wasn't it?
Yeah, just a bunch of usual debris that falls through into the tray. So you should clean your tray from time to time, and it does get mucky. I just gave it a quick scrape with the Hive tool before, so it is a bit mucky there, but that's what it normally looks like, because you've got debris falling right through and collecting in the tray. So you can give that a good clean and a wash every now and then, and that's one piece of the maintenance. If you're using it to catch hive beetles, then you'll have some oil in here which will also need cleaning out every month or two.
Cedar, with the apiary that we've got here, just wondering about, will you test all the hives, or will you just do a couple and see?
We have tested them all, and so it's important to do at least a couple, and the more you have, of course, the harder it is to do them all, but you can see once you get used to it, it's a pretty quick operation, and so we're asking everyone to put that effort in, because it's so important to us in Australia to try and remain varroa-free, make a huge difference to the amateur and the professional beekeepers, and also to the orchardists, for example, the almonds and so on. Because if we get varroa established in Australia, it's going to cost more time, more money for every beekeeper, whether you're amateur or professional, to keep on top of it. And it's going to affect the movement of bees to places like the almonds for pollination and so on. So it's very, very serious for us, and that's why we're asking for cooperation, and if that means a little bit more time testing all your hives, why not? Particularly if you're neighbouring a yellow or a red area. Well, the yellow area you will already have the DPI looking after you, but particularly if you're anywhere near the hotspots. But more have appeared lately, so you never quite know. It's possible that someone moved bees to your area before we knew varroa was in the state, and that could be around.
Yes, this is very serious, and hopefully we can kick it out. I also want to say it's not the end of the world. Every other continent does do a lot of beekeeping with varroa mites. So if we can't kick it out, then what we'll be doing is learning from the rest of the world on the management practices that you have to include in your beekeeping to minimise the damage varroa mites cause.
Yeah, and on that, Charlie is tuned in from Newcastle and just saying to encourage beekeepers to help in this operation in Newcastle, and they'll learn a lot about the process and contribute to eradicating the varroa.
So that's to volunteer?
Yeah, I think that's what Charlie's sort of saying. So that's all good. And in terms of spring management now here in Australia, should people be starting to do that now if they're not in the red zone?
It's a really good idea. DPI is encouraging everybody in New South Wales, and if you're outside New South Wales, then you can go for it as well. It's a good idea. It's something new you can learn, and you never know. You might be the one to pick up a new zone, which would be extremely helpful and give us a fighting chance to eradicate varroa.
Well, that's still on varroa and possibly volunteering and caring for your hives, but that question was on spring management and whether it's time to start.
Yeah, but also in terms of with what's happening with varroa, because one of Tizza, who tunes in every week, saying like they have 5 hives, and if she does her spring management, she doesn't want any more hives. So if she's got a split hives, are you able to then pass them on? And she's in New South Wales.
Okay, you cannot move a hive. So this is the restriction at the moment in New South Wales. We can't move hives around. So the spring management for you, as you say, you can take a split, and that's my preferred method. So you can go ahead and take a split, and that will drastically reduce the swarming tendencies. Now the last 2 live streams have been focused on spring management, and what we did was cut out some of the comb in the brood box, which then leaves new space for the bees to actually draw the comb out, and then more real estate there for the queen bee to lay her eggs. And that's the primary swarming trigger, is that overcrowding, nowhere to lay. So you can get in there and make some more space in the brood nest. You can add another brood box or super to your hive. That will also help. You could also get in there and knock off any queen cells they are preparing. So they're your spring management practices. And if you want to have a look at that, have a look at the last 2 live stream videos. And it's not too late to start not too early to start to answer your question. In the southern colder parts of the country it might be a bit early still, but here we are. Spring is pretty much here for our bees on the east coast here of Australia.
Fantastic. This is a question not about varroa mite now, and in terms of having the brood box nice and chockers, looking good, but just wondering any tips on encouraging the bees to go into their flow super.
Yeah, there's a number of ways to do that, and it is one of those funny things where one hive will go straight up into the flow super and another colony will take weeks or sometimes months. So for those slow colonies, one very simple way is to reverse the order of the super and the brood box. In other words, put the brood box on top and the super below. The super sitting on the base. The bees have to then crawl up through the flow super to get to access the brood box, which you still have the queen excluder there if you wish, and you leave it like that for a week, and by then the bees have really got used to crawling over the flow frames, and off it goes, and then you can put them back in the usual order. That's one way. Another way is to brush on beeswax. When I say brush on, you've melted the beeswax with a brush, and just, you don't have to do a thorough, really neat job. You're just splashing beeswax all over the new flow frames, and the bees, that makes the bees curious as to what's going on, and they want to tidy up the messy wax and so on. So again, they start getting involved with the flow frame.
One really simple, easy way is you just scrape some burr comb off the top of your frames. If your hive is ready for a super, no doubt the bees will be building some comb on top of the frames. Scrape some of that off with your hive tool, just press it into the flow frame surface. Put that frame in the window and you can enjoy watching them recycle that wax in that area, and that gets them activated on the flow frame straight away. However, you probably won't get a lot of action in honey stores until 2 things happen. One is you've got a lot of bees, and that coincides with a good nectar flow. Then things happen very quickly and you get to see honey stores building up in your flow super.
Yep.
Great, there's a lot of US beaks tuning in this morning and giving some really good tips on how often they check their hives and different things like that, I guess because they're used to having the varroa mite over there.
Yeah, I mean, often people say, oh, how often should I check my hive? In other words, what's the minimum amount I could do? But I'd like to encourage those that are new to beekeeping to actually do it more often than is recommended, to really get used to opening up a beehive and checking it out. The more you do that, the more familiar you'll become with the health of your bees, how they're doing, what you're seeing on the outside at the entrance and at the back window, how that relates to what's happening in the hive. But it's that familiarity, happy to have bees all over your hands and and really getting used to what good healthy comb looks like, the brood comb and so on. So, you know, go in every second day if they're like nice sunny warm days and if the bees are gentle and so on, and enjoy it.
Totally. So with the sugar shake test, the one you're going to do tomorrow, Cedar, with the sticky board, will you film that, or will you just sort of fill us all in next week on it?
Well, there's not much action going on the sticky board. I mean, have a look online and have a look what other people do, is what I would say. We are very unlikely to find mites here. We'll keep doing our sugar shakes, keep doing our sticky boards, but it's pretty unlikely that we'll be able to show you what varroa mites look like on a sticky board. So
I hope we don't.
Yeah.
So Google that and have a look what that bit looks like.
How did the varroa mite get to Australia?
So that's unknown at the moment, but usually the way these incursions occur is through the ports, and it was picked up in Newcastle port, so one assumes that it came in through cargo.
Oh, really?
There's all sorts of other rumours that I won't repeat.
Right.
Because they're just rumours, and we'll find out in
But
a long time.
bees can exist on ships, on old ships. They can also exist in, potentially large furniture that's in containers. Perhaps somebody didn't notice there was a hive and it was winter when it was sent, so they were hibernating in the back of an old lounge. Who knows? That's how bees can move around. So what we have here in Australia is sentinel hives around our ports, which get checked every 6 weeks, and if varroa is detected, then it's all on. And that's what did happen. It does look like the varroa have been here longer than first anticipated, so they've been here for many months, and they have been spread around by the movement of a commercial apiary. So we're behind the 8 ball, and hopefully we can catch it.
Yeah, totally. The other question in terms of spring management, could our flow beekeepers just add another honey super box?
Certainly. Yeah. That gives the bees more room, because as you know, with a flow hive, there are 6 frames in an 8 frame box, which gives the bees slightly less room than in a standard super. So there's good argument for putting a second super in a flow hive, particularly if you've got a vigorous colony and you get strong nectar flow. And leave that extra room, not only to store honey, but to what's called fan it off, to dehydrate the nectar into honey. They need the real estate or the space at comb to do that.
Thanks, Stu. Brady's asking, how often should you feed sugar water to your bees and how much? And also a big appreciation for all the work that Flowhive does out there.
So here in the east coast of Australia, we don't actually find a need to feed sugar water to our bees. So that's what you mean by sugar water, I'm sure, is a syrup where you cook up some syrup. If you're doing what's called a thick syrup, it'll be 2 to 1, 2 parts sugar to 1 part water. You dissolve the sugar by heating it, and then you put that in feeders, which is lots of different types of feeders. And if you're going for a thin syrup, it'll be 1 to 1. Now, some beekeepers, especially in the southern cooler parts, will feed sugar water 1 to 1 in the springtime just to get their colony going, just to get them a jump for it. And what they're doing is simulating a nectar flow early, so that when the nectar flow does come, they've got more bees already in their hive ready to go. The other reason, and the main reason people feed bees, is if they're going to starve in the time when there's no flowers, which for most areas is the winter time. So if you have a long cold winter and you've got a colony that doesn't have any stores, the bees need those stores in order to survive. What they do is they will eat that honey, they'll disconnect their wing muscles and they'll vibrate. So they're like little heater bees, they're little motors, and they need that heat to survive through a long cold winter. So without stores, your colony could starve or perish through that winter time. So if you find you've got a colony that is low on stores and you've got a long cold winter ahead, then that's when you'd feed what's called a thick syrup, which is that 2 to 1 ratio. and the bees will then store that as if it's honey in the frames. Now ideally you don't need to feed bees at all because you've got the nectar flow all the time, but that's not always the case. And although sugar's not as good for bees as them foraging on flowers, it's better than them starving through that winter time.
If you look at thebeekeeper.org, which many of you will know about, it's an educational site, there's an interview with Randy Oliver, who's a scientific beekeeper, and he'll go into the detail of how you tell if your bees are hungry. The general way is, lots and lots of them are bottoms up into the comb, looking for the last bits of honey in the honeycomb. But there's more subtle ways than that Randy can tell you about on thebeekeeper.org, and I recommend that if you want to learn some of the really fine points of beekeeping.
Fantastic, thanks Stu. Someone's just noticed, Stu, your veil is different to Cedar's one.
Yep,
so I
is.
thought maybe it's a good point to talk about the Clear View hood that we now sell.
Yeah, we sell this Clearview one. I'm not sure if this is exactly like the one we sell.
Yeah, I think
because
so.
I did have a few prototypes we were testing and I've got them all mixed up. But yeah, it's clear up the top where my eyes are, but where I'm breathing, it means my breath can still go in and out, and therefore not fog up the clear. So I'm finding it quite good. Sometimes I get reflections from it that, nothing's perfect. And in preference, I could go either way. I can go either this way or the mesh. But it does give a lovely, lovely clear view.
Yeah.
What are you going to do now?
Oh. Up here we've got an adjustment to stop the reflection, so the closer you have it to your face, the less reflection you get.
Oh, there you go.
There you go, see?
So there's always more to learn.
You needed to ring customer support, Stu.
Yes, I'm going to have to get myself one of those. I'll have to phone in too.
Oh, you will. I'll put an order in for you. Now, with the hive that you've just tested for the sugar shake, will you just put it all back together and everything so you can say that there's no varroa in the hive that you've just tested? Is that
Yes,
right?
we're confident that we don't have varroa here at the moment. We'll keep testing just in case and to do our bit for the state of New South Wales here, where we're trying to get on top of the mite. That hive will go back together shortly. We're probably going to need to get our smoky going again. Oh, there it goes. They were a bit grumpy, this hive, so we might add a little smoke. We'll start putting that hive back together. You've got a last question, Trace?
Oh, this is a go. See, just people who tuned in last week and saw that you swapped out those frames. Was it 3 frames you put in, and it looks like you've already built them out in a week? Is that...
It was absolutely amazing. I was surprised. I cannot even tell which ones they are. They built and drew out the combs, but we cut the comb out of 2 of these frames, and I think it was that one and that one. They already have brood in it, and they're already well drawn out. So it's amazing how fast bees will go. In fact, I've seen them fill a whole box of comb in 2 days if you're a fresh swarm and there's a lot of nectar around. So bees can really go at an alarming pace building that comb, and it's amazing. They've got to excrete that wax from their wax glands and then mix it with their mandibles and put it in the right spot, and somehow they're all cooperating together to form the geometric pattern, even though one bee only contributes to one little tiny part of one cell. So it's completely amazing to watch, and in this case it was hard to tell because they actually used a lot of recycled wax to do it, and the wax wasn't all bright and white like you'll get when you've got a fresh nectar flow or a fresh swarm. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you missed the beginning of this, go back and have a look. We showed you how to do the sugar shake and also the sticky board. And just a reminder for those in New South Wales, you still cannot move a hive, but please do your spring management. If you missed the last 2 live streams about spring management, have a look at that. You want to make sure you're doing your spring management and your sugar shakes to help stop the incursion of the varroa mite. Same time next week. Let us know what you'd like us to cover. If you've got ideas, we're always open to ideas. And thank you very much for all of your great questions.
Yeah. Happy beekeeping.